Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast, brought to you by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. If you want your heating and air needs, you need to call our friends at Blue Water Climate Control at 865-299-2290. Check them out online at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com or on Twitter at blueh2o_climate. Whatever your needs are, they can service those needs in the heating and air department. If you just need a tune-up for your heating unit, if you're having an issue with this cold weather coming through and you need to get them out there, you can book an appointment online. They'll send a serviceman out to service your unit, look and see what you need, make any repair that you need. They'll do it the right way the first time. That's Blue Water Climate Control. With Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Plenty to get to on this Tuesday edition of the podcast. And Rob, let's start first with a little hoops. Chances Tennessee plays basketball next week. You feeling pretty good about this thing?
Yeah, based on conversations I've had today, I think good chance they'll play next Wednesday night. I think there are a couple of different programs they're talking to. UT Martin is the one I heard is the biggest possibility. I think for Wednesday, the possibility that they work ETSU in somewhere. I don't know when that would be, but I mean they're not even practicing right now. They don't get back on the practice court until Friday for the first time. Rick comes out of quarantine tomorrow. So, but since all this went down Monday, that the only thing the guys have been able to do is shoot for 1 hour a day in the practice facility. So you miss 4 games, you miss 2 weeks of practice right here when everybody else is getting rolling. I mean, I don't act like it's some insurmountable obstacle, but it is far less than ideal for a team that was going to have 3 completely new guys, and Keon, Jaden, and Anasicki played big roles.
Are they obviously the hope was to pick up one of those games Wednesday? Is there still hope they could pick up 3 more in the month of December? Or is that too tall of a task?
I don't think they could pick up 3 more with conference play starting on December 28th. But I could certainly see them adding 1 or 2 more in addition to the one we're talking about next Wednesday night.
And from a health standpoint, this is the issue has been administratively, coaching staff wise, more so than with players, right?
Behind the scenes stuff. And there may have been a player return a positive. I don't know that for sure, but I know that multiple, support staff, administrators that are around the program every day have tested positive, and pretty much with just one exception, very, very, very mild symptoms. Like Rick, I think the worst thing he reported was a headache and a little bit of a cough. And the one exception is not dire. It's just, somebody who did have some
more significant symptoms.
Yeah.
Well, and so the hope is that this team can return to the practice floor this weekend and get themselves ready to play with a potential game on Wednesday night, and then turn around and play Cincinnati on Saturday, which would obviously be a very intriguing matchup, as there's a lot of interest from a lot of people about wanting to see this basketball team. So we'll hopefully get to see them on the floor this time next week and getting ready to kick off their season and get things started there. So that's the latest in basketball. Let's jump to football. Austin, I'll start with you in recruiting. Obviously, the Terrence Lewis news on Monday night of the decommitment, second decommitment from the state of Florida. The question we got in the chat, the question you hear from a lot of people, is this 2 isolated things? Is the wheels coming off this thing? What do you make of the Terrence Lewis decommitment? Obviously, a very high-profile player with a lot of ranking, and when Tennessee got a commitment from him, it drew a lot of attention. So it's no surprise the decommitment drew a lot of attention nationally as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, ranking-wise, as far as the flash of the commitment ranking, those type of things, it's a loss. Now, again, I said this in the chat, and I truly mean it. He's not one of the top 2 players in this class committed. I don't believe that. I don't think you believe that. I think he's a good player, but I think Terrence Lewis, who's had some off the field issues, it could equally be. I mean, I told you, I think he could be Ray Lewis and he could be JJ Peterson. Like I think that it's boom or bust for him. I think he's that kind of player. I think if he hit on him, he's a guy that's an all SEC player. And so I don't think you really know. I think the bigger loss is Demarius McGee. Tennessee's going to fight like crazy to get both those guys back in. Lewis called Tennessee still his top school when he tweeted it out. So I give Tennessee at least a 50-50 shot. much like they had with Tyon Evans. I don't think this one is one that is dead and gone. And neither do I think McGee is either. The longer that McGee goes, I think the better Tennessee's chances are. And I think there's a good chance that he doesn't do anything until February. If that's the case, then I think Tennessee will have every bit of chance to get him back in the boat. And so that's kind of where I am with these two decommitments. I think that right now they're isolated, but when other kids see it, you wonder if they start in the back of their mind thinking, wonder what's happening. What did they do it for? Maybe I should do it. Because how much of this is a copycat thing? Kids commit to schools because teams are hot and it's the right thing. They can easily decommit when things are going the opposite direction. So, like I said in the chat, I think that Dylan Brooks is by far the most important player in this class. And if Tennessee holds on to him, then everything is okay.
AP, I saw that post. I was surprised you left Cody Brown off that. Is that just because of Tyon?
Well, I went Tyon over Cody because I know where the staff feels like. I think they feel like the Tyon's further along in his development. I mean, Tyon's also 2 years older. He should be further along in his development. And but I mean, Tennessee's still high on both guys, and I just put Tyon above Cody because I know that's the staff really coveted Tyon, getting him back into class. When they lost him for a brief moment there, it was a blow. And so to get him back in, they were super excited.
I got a couple more recruiting questions I will get to in just a second, but I want to throw this out there as well. The Lewis decommitment's not a shock because he's flirted with schools throughout the fall, late summer, fall. I mean, when there's a school of the day seemingly on Twitter with him. But Rob, it's interesting for kids decommitting, and not just to Tennessee, but kids around the country decommitting right now. It's an interesting time frame. You almost think that if a kid is decommitting at this point, that he's got a destination. He better have a destination in place because, with the old Apollo 13 line, the Earth's getting bigger in the window, that you're running out of dates here. You're running out of time. You can't take visits. You better have an idea of what you're going to do when you decommit right now, shouldn't you, Rob?
That's what I would think. I mean, because of the reason you just mentioned. I mean, you're not taking a visit anywhere. You're not having a coach come into your home. So, what new information are you gathering? Unless it's a team that, finished second when you made the commitment the first time, that you already have a relationship with the coaching staff. You've already been, on campus for visits, last fall or in those few weekends where they had junior days before everything got shut down in March. So, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, AP has more insight into those two specific cases, but when you're talking generally, yeah, I would agree with you. If you're decommitting, a couple of weeks before early signing day and you're not going to have a chance to take a visit, I think you probably have an idea about what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that notion at all. I mean, I think Demarius McGee, if in his notion would be to go to LSU. Miami's trying there, but I think it'd be LSU. But again, if he doesn't do anything on the 16th or the first signing wave, then I think Tennessee's chances of getting him back in this class are fairly solid. He's not taking any visits, Brent, ever. Again, this is the casualty of being a guy that kind of was a late bloomer, that added all these offers, got all this interest in the year of COVID where you can't take visits. I mean, you can go, but it's not the same. Like, Ty Simpson will be here this weekend. He'll watch the game, but it's not the same as going to the complex, hanging out in there in the coach's office, picking Chaney's brain, drawing plays on the board, going to Jeremy's office, having your hour meet and greet with the head coach like you do at all places. I mean, the kid went to Clemson last weekend and then drove home and did a Zoom call with Dabo and Streeter. I mean, like, he was literally 30 or 50 yards from those guys when he was in the stadium. And then he had to drive all the way back to West Tennessee to do a Zoom call with them because he couldn't meet with them in person. Like that, while again, it's better than nothing, it's still very hard.
Do we know if Dabo pointed at him while he was in the stands? Do we know that, AP?
He did not do that.
No, but we know Dabo probably talked about some other schools that Ty might be considering, because Dabo seems to like to talk about everybody else these days, and has an opinion on everybody else. That's certainly the case that seems to be with him right now. With Terrence Lewis, is that Miami? I mean, we heard the Nebraska stuff, and then Miami didn't want him early on. AP, do you think that's
honestly
Miami?
I would lean Miami, but I really don't know. I think this kid is kind of opening things back up to see what's out there. And then if nothing's out there, then I think he ends up back at Tennessee. That's kind of my feel.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's
again, the public though, the public perception is,
sure.
because he said decommitment in his tweet. It doesn't matter that he said Tennessee's still my top school.
Right.
The public perception is the Vols lost 5-star Terrence Lewis. Because Bruce Feldman, who has a lot of followers, he tweets that out there. If Tennessee loses 3-star Jordan Mosley, Bruce Feldman don't care. But because they lost Terrence Lewis and he's a 5-star by some, then it's a bigger deal. And so the perception is out there now that Tennessee lost 2 guys in a matter of days. And you just wonder if that has any kind of effect on anybody else.
All right, let me ask you quickly about Nyland Green and Travali Price, 2 guys that you have mentioned and that you have talked about in the war room. Let's start first with Nyland Green. We keep hearing November. It's no longer November. Is a decision coming, or is this just going to be a signing day thing with him?
Well, the kid's the one that said November.
Right.
And then last week, I even said then, I know that he wanted to wait till the end of his senior season. Well, his senior season ended Friday night. So if he didn't do it Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, it was going to be not November anymore. So we're now into December. And, so I think that in a perfect world, something happens late this week. Now, Again, this is the same kid that was going to put out a top 5 for seemingly 3 or 4 months before he finally got and put out the top 5. The longer it goes, the more you just feel like it waits till the 16th. I think if it gets out of this weekend, he's waiting till the end.
Okay.
Georgia, I said in the chat, it's Tennessee and Georgia. I know Clemson feels confident. I don't believe Clemson is a factor. I think this is Tennessee and the Dogs. And again, if you're weighing between those 2 schools, they all follow the same other recruits. They see other corners decommitted, Terrence Lewis decommitted. I just wonder what kind of effect it has on a guy like Nyland Green, who's legitimately weighing his options between Tennessee and a Georgia team that's a top 10 team that is 45 minutes away.
All right, let's talk Travali Price. Is that real, or is that pipe dream wishful hoping for Tennessee?
I think it's real. Okay. I think, if I was a betting man, I would still lean NC State, because NC State's had a good year. Are they 7-3 right now? They've had a really good year. Tennessee's sitting at 2-5. Again, if you just put them on paper, and I know NC State's program traditionally is not what Tennessee's is, but defensive linemen have been drafted out of there, several of them, over the last several years.
High.
Yes. And so I think that's a sales pitch. Now, was Tennessee late to the party with offering the brother? Yeah, they could have offered him earlier, but I don't blame him. Listen, Hubs, you and I did the Jaden Tate thing over there. And I like the kid. He's 5'10", 220 pounds, 230 maybe. He's not very big. He's a fullback.
Right.
I know he's talked with Eric Kane. Eric Kane's going to have a story up on him later today. And, then he says Tennessee's talking about defensive line. Sure they are. I still think that if he ended up here, he'd be a fullback, and would probably play more fullback than he ever would on the defensive line.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Body type wise, he's not built like an SEC defensive lineman. That's not a knock on the kid. It's just from a physical standpoint, you stand there and talk to him and visit with him, and you don't go, hey, that's an SEC, or you don't even say that's a Power 5 defensive lineman. I think if he went to NC State, he would, and if that's where he goes, I think he'll play more on the
people have talked
side.
about, people were like, I saw threads last week talking about, I'm sure if we take Travali Price and Jaden Tate will end up being the better player because that's what happens at Tennessee. And somebody said, no, this is more like the Derrick Rogers Nash Nance deal. No, Nash Nance could have went and played at smaller programs and been a starter somewhere. He could have went to Kennesaw State and been a starter. I think Jaden Tate's limited in his size to be able to play at any level. Again, when you're 5'10" and you're 230 pounds, are you not limited in a lot of positions to play at any kind of real football at the college level? I think you are.
So Tennessee has two decommits in a week's time. There's plenty of talk out there about coaching candidates. Where's everything with Jeremy Pruitt and this, that, and the other. Rob, I'm not a big believer in the old vote of confidence, public announcements and statements and all those things. But if you're Tennessee's administration, do you have to consider that this thing is to the point where, particularly if things don't go well Saturday against Florida, who's going to be a 3-touchdown favorite at home, that you have to go somewhere in that direction and make some kind of statement if your plan is to keep Jeremy Pruitt?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to, but I think I would. I mean, if I knew I was bringing him back, if I knew that I wasn't eating whatever, $16 million worth of buyouts for Jeremy and his staff. I mean, if I knew that, given all the noise out there right now, the very obvious and understandable fan discontent, yes, I think someone with Coach Fulmer's, especially someone with Coach Fulmer's standing with his fan base, I would do that. And, kind of give some reasons why I was doing that. Young freshman class, special circumstances of the season because of the virus, all that kind of thing. But I think that would be beneficial at this point.
You think for recruiting that's needed, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fine line because you don't know what happens the next 3 weeks.
Right.
I think that's such a fine line. And again, I think.
And look, it rings hollow for some, doesn't it?
Well, sure it does, because you know as I do that there's been a guy like Nick Saban who said, I'm not going to Alabama. I'm not going to Alabama. And then he went to Alabama. And then there have been plenty of ADs that have went out there and said, my guy is fine. And the next week he was out. I mean, like that, so it does ring hollow. But, I do think it's a fine line to walk because you don't know what happens the next few weeks. Let's say Tennessee loses to Florida by 3 touchdowns, but then beats A&M. Again, A&M is a good team. They're not a great team. But let's say they beat A&M and beat Vandy, and they finished 4-6. You look at missed opportunities, a year that got away, you can kind of sell that a little better. But what if Tennessee were to lose all 3? So much could happen.
Right.
Over the next 3 weeks and how it all plays out.
And man, I know fans don't want to hear this, but Coach Fulmer is in the building. He knows just what a blank show August was, in terms of preseason practice, in terms of the limitations they were under. I mean, he has an intimate feel for that, and I think that will be a factor in this as well.
But the devil's advocate to Rob would be the fact that everybody else is going through the same thing.
Yeah, but do we know that Kentucky had 40 guys at practice at any point in time?
Mississippi State took 49 to Athens, Georgia, and played the Bulldogs within 7.
Sure, but I mean,
there are plenty of instances. Again, we talked about this the other day. Tennessee's 5-game losing streak at this point is not because of COVID, but COVID has had an impact on it. Again, Wanya and Cade having 42 days of contact tracing has an impact on both those guys. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Multiple freshmen having 28 days of contact tracing, to me, has a far greater impact than the 42 days that Cade has had, because again, Cade's played a lot of ball, easier for him to step in and play. But don't think that for a minute that that's not had an impact. Look at Trey Smith. When you take practice away from a kid, how many games did it take him last year before he kind of started to look like Trey Smith of old? It was about halfway through the year.
I was going to say second half of the season.
Yeah. So, you start taking away 40 days, 28 days. It's hard not to think that doesn't have an impact, especially for some young guys, whether it be freshmen, redshirt freshmen, or even sophomores that are still trying to, get their feet underneath them a little bit.
And I'm not saying wipe the slate clean because of that.
Right.
My point being, I think that will matter to Philip Fulmer because of how much knowledge he has and what, seeing firsthand what practice looked like those first 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. Again, I think
I'm with you, Rob.
I think Jeremy is back in 2021. But how the next 3 weeks go, you never know what 1 or 2, 3 money people go, I've seen enough. And they make a call. That happens. So again, that's why these next 3 weeks are important. And I mean, like, Tennessee really needs that Vanderbilt game to go off. I mean, Vanderbilt, a team that looked like they were starting to turn the corner, playing Kentucky 38-35, playing Florida close for at least a half, then goes to Missouri and gets beat 41-0.
Yeah, they know shit. And Tennessee needs a win. No matter who it's against, that they need a win. There's no doubt about that. Rob, Austin made a point in the chat. He and I have talked about this and a little bit just in casual conversations. And the point he made was things would look different for Jeremy Pruitt right now if post Kentucky, after the JG second quarter meltdown, if this program would have said, we're going Harrison Bailey.
Completely agree. Could not agree more.
You agree with that notion?
Totally.
that the fans, even if they had lost all these games, that the fans feeling towards Jeremy Pruitt and the direction of the program would be different, even if Harrison Bailey was struggling as a freshman.
I mean, if you polled fans, and I mean, not just the hardcore types on the generals quarters, but just season ticket holders in general, I think that's been their biggest source of frustration this whole season.
Just tired of number 2, man. They're just tired of him.
They've got Guarantano fatigue, and I mean, I hate it for the kid. I mean, I think we can all agree he's a conscientious, hard worker, good teammate, guy that teammates respect. But fans, the people that are footing the bill for this program have been over it. And I could not agree more with AP. I mean, that is totally my stance as well.
It's an interesting I mean, hindsight's 2020, but it is an interesting thought process because, Austin, you made the point in a conversation we were talking about. You feel like with the plan that they went to Arkansas with to try to win, the plan they took to Auburn to try to win, that Harrison Bailey could have played that plan, from start to finish. And
they still may not have won, but again,
would have been in the situation to have a chance.
Most fans would have, if Tennessee was sitting there at 2-5 and Harrison has played every game post Kentucky, most fans would say, that's okay. There's some learning curve as a freshman quarterback. We're going to give Coach Pruitt a pass. Now, there's going to be a portion of the fan base that would still be mad. There's a portion of this fan base that if Tennessee was undefeated right now, they'd find reasons to fault. Or that being any fan base. That's not just a Tennessee thing. I mean, fans.
I know you can remember in AP too, in the 90s when Tennessee was rolling. I mean, how many people were calling into talk radio criticizing David Cutler's play calling or Chiefs defense when Tennessee was winning 10, 11 games a year?
Or all that Philip Fulmer did on the sideline was clap his hands when something bad happened. They wanted him to yell at somebody. They wanted him to, to snap on somebody. Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the case. That fans, there's always going to be something for unrest. But your point, Austin, is that the vast majority of people would have said, hey, they made a commitment for the future, and they made a hardline decision in going with Bailey that would have benefited Jeremy Pruitt much better than the decisions he's made.
You're going to find out Saturday, because this is not a great Florida defense. You're going to find out Saturday how important a veteran quarterback is for, changing the blocking schemes at the line and the running game, all those type things. Because if Tennessee rolls out there and they can't run it, is that because Florida figured them out? Or is that because Jared actually would be able to check them into the right run situations at times on things? I think you're going to find out a lot Saturday, about, how important number 2 was in things that weren't throwing the football.
This is a Florida team that gives up about 140 yards a game on the ground. So, Rob, they're not dominant on the ground. And you will learn some things from how well he can manage the game. And how well does Tennessee help him manage the game? Him being Harrison Bailey with a lot of check with me stuff at the line of scrimmage. I mean, it felt like in that Arkansas game that they were helping Jared out with a lot of the play calling at the line of scrimmage. But maybe that's not the case. But that's certainly what it felt like with the way that they managed that game. I think the other thing you have to do here, and this gives you an opportunity. Look, if you're going to stay in this game, Rob, you got to ugly it up. You got to limit possessions. You got to milk the clock.
Which is the opposite of what a guy like Ty Simpson wants to see on Saturday. He wants to see some ball plays drawn up and them not to be so vanilla and ball controlish.
I think you have a talk with Ty Simpson on Thursday and say, "Hey man, here's what you need to expect because we're going to try to keep this one close. This isn't going to be the offense that you would play in."
I mean, I just don't. I mean, I don't know that you play up tempo because I think you got to try to shorten this game a little bit because I don't think you feel like defensively you can stop this
I
offense.
think However, I saw you post it in the chat, and I mean, I think it's a horrible matchup, just a horrible matchup for Tennessee with a veteran quarterback who's super smart, good decision maker, a freak in Pitts, and the problems Tennessee's had in covering the middle of the field. I mean, and this goes back to the point you've been making for a while about the need to score in this league. I was doing a little, started, looking ahead, doing the matchup piece and looking at Florida this week, and just noticed there are 6 teams in the SEC averaging 30-plus points a game this year. I bet that's a record. I don't know that it is because I didn't go back and do the research, and there was almost 3 teams averaging 40 because Alabama's at 48, Florida's at 43, and Ole Miss is at 39.8. And yeah. I mean, yeah, to the point you've been making, you're not winning games 17-13 in this league. You better be able to ding the scoreboard up.
Absolutely. It's amazing where Austin, how quickly it changes because we're not that far removed from 10-9, or whatever that LSU Alabama national title game
6-3, wasn't it?
6-3 or whatever that thing was. I mean, that's not that long ago. But this league is vastly different, and you better find ways to score because it's hard to keep teams from scoring. And if you're going to do that, you better be ball control. Try to play a little bit like Kentucky has wanted to play, and see if you can hang around and almost shorten the game as much as you can and be as perfect as you can with every limited opportunity that you get offensively. That's why this matchup is so bad. I mean, Kyle Trask a year ago torched Tennessee in the middle of the football field a year ago, and Tennessee was much better covering the middle of the football field a year ago than they are now.
And was that his first start?
Yeah,
thought it was.
Yeah, and he lit Tennessee up in the middle.
The old saying, "This is not your grandfather's Alabama," or "This is not your grandfather's Tennessee." This isn't your younger brother's SEC. I mean, like that's what it boils down to. It has changed in a matter of just a few years. Just to your point on the low scoring Alabama LSU game, look at last year's Alabama LSU game, scored in the 40s. I mean, it's just kind of is what it is now. It's what the way college football's played. It's played more like Andy Kelly throwing to Corey Fleming and the old Nashville Cats Arena League.
And even more, I mean, when you think about that LSU Alabama game, think about how many defensive players were drafted from those two teams last year. I mean, it wasn't like those were porous defenses, and They had some studs.
Yeah, they certainly did have that, and it has changed dramatically for sure. Big picture, college football, big picture. What do you think this playoff thing is going to look like? I mean, it doesn't feel like the Big Ten is going to have anybody eligible for the playoff, are they?
I posed this question on The Nation to Pat Dooley from Gainesville on Sunday. If Ohio State does not meet the standard, and Pat, believes that they'll finagle their way and pick up a game to be able to meet the standard. I don't disagree with that. I don't think that, but let's say they don't, and then somehow Clemson beats. I know this is a lot of what ifs. Notre Dame beats Clemson a second time around. Clemson's got 2 losses. And then somehow Florida can outscore Alabama in the title game. And then you've got 3 SEC teams sitting there with 1 loss. They've all beat each other. And no Big Ten participant because none of those teams qualified, whether it be win-loss record or number of games played. Clemson's got 2 losses. And then, of course, nobody from the Big 12 or the Pac-10. You got a potential for 3 SEC teams.
They'd be handing out some fat TV checks in Destin.
While you've got to have a few things fall into place for that to happen, this isn't like option Z and Y and all these different things have to have happen. That's not too far fetched.
Yeah, I agree with Pat though. I think the Big Ten gets Ohio State another game, and that's a big fat check. If you're a playoff team.
Again, if I'm Michigan, I'm coveting up next week just to stick it to Ohio State.
Here's what's interesting with the Big Ten. They haven't shuffled their, the SEC granted the commissioner this autonomy to shuffle. to shuffle to try to ensure more games for everybody. That hasn't happened in the Big Ten, and with a conference schedule with little wiggle room in terms of open dates and extra weekends. I'm surprised they haven't done more reshuffling in the Big Ten. Okay, we get you guys a game this week against with this team because so and so's out. We'll make something happen this way.
Yeah, they're gonna make Nebraska play Ohio State a second time just for pissing off the people. And
but they haven't worked anything to try to. It doesn't seem like or feel like to try to get extra games in there or to. Okay, we're going to move you here because it makes more sense because we can pick up this game later or whatever.
I don't think they thought about it, Brent. I don't think they. I think that the whole time they weren't playing. Then they realized, oh crap, we're going to get left behind, and then it was just kind of just throw it out there and see what happens. Same thing with the Pac-12.
But they've adjusted. They've adjusted a little bit in the Pac-12.
Yeah, they have.
They're playing games at 9 a.m. Brent. I mean,
but they they moved the Utah here, and they moved a couple of games around to make it happen. The Big Ten's just not done any of that. It seems like
it just means more.
It does in the SEC, that's for sure. And for Tennessee, it means a lot for Tennessee fans because they want to see some promise and they want to see some hope. And we'll see if Tennessee can give that fan base that on Saturday as Harrison Bailey appears to be poised to get his start. Austin, we feel like Tennessee is going to be pretty. As long as testing goes okay, maybe some guys don't have any practice and they may not be in the greatest condition or greatest game shape, but it does feel like they're going to be okay in terms of numbers compared to what it looked like late last week.
Yeah, I think all the defensive guys that were out due to contact tracing should be back Saturday. I think they may miss a few guys on the offensive side who, again, are not, are still going to be in that 14-day window. I don't know how many people listened to the 2-minute drill we did, but the contact tracing dates back 48 hours from either symptom onset or your positive test. So like, let's say player X tests positive on Sunday, you go back 48 hours, that could be Friday at 4:00. Well, let's say, let's just throw out names. Actually, I'm not going to throw out names because I don't think that's fair because they'll think I'm being real about who it is. But let's say player Y is around the positive player for 15 minutes on Friday. Well, that's when his 14-day window for contact tracing would begin. It would not be when the positive test happened. It would be when he spent the time. So that would put him back at 4:00 this Friday. And so I think Tennessee said to get most everybody back. There'll be a few not there. He mentioned 2 positives. The 1 positive will be back for this game because that's a 10-day quarantine. And then providing he can pass all the cardiovascular stuff. And then the second positive, which did not take place till later in the week last week, will not be back this week.
So we'll see. Maybe Friday afternoon, it may be Saturday morning for some guys when their contact tracing expires, but it does appear many guys will be back.
And again, we're not going to mention names because I don't think that's fair to everybody, but these are veteran type guys that to me don't necessarily have to have the practice to go out and play. They know mentally what has to happen. They can see the game plan. I think that it's less of an impact on some of those vets than it would be if it was a younger kid.
That'll be interesting to watch for sure. Plenty of things to talk about the rest of this week. Plenty of discussion on the general's quarters. We'll talk more about some basketball as that season gets ready to get started next week. Obviously, Tennessee and Florida this week. We'll have the mailbag podcast coming up for you on Thursday, but that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the podcast presented by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Be sure and check them out at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com. For Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.